You just sent my slide a few seconds ago, so I don't know if they are ready to be shown. But so it's a pleasure to be there. Good afternoon. So I didn't have the pleasure to be formally introduced, but as Roland was saying, my name is Frederic Destrebecq. I'm the Executive Director of the European Brain Council. So in the first slide of my presentation, it basically says what EBC is about. So we are a European organization established here in Brussels to represent what we call the brain space and all the tiers of the community, primarily patient organizations. So we have as founding members the two umbrella federations of patients living with neurological disorders as well as mental disorders. The second pillar of our membership are scientific societies. And the third pillar, so like the European Academy of Neurology, the European Psychiatric Association, and also federations of basic neuroscience. And last but not least, we also work with industry partners as well as national brain councils, such as the Belgian Brain Council. Okay, yeah, it's loading. Sorry, it was a bit heavy. Okay, and I'm on slide number 2 with all the nice logos to show the extent of our representativity. All right, so what EBC actually is doing is that we foster cooperation between our member organizations and other stakeholders. We promote dialogue between scientists, industry, and society. And we emphasize the importance of interactions with EU institutions. And that's actually what we are doing best, is actually to speak on behalf of the community to promote brain research, brain health, and brain innovation at a European level. And in doing so, we raise awareness about the challenges linked to the brain and its disorders. So the way by which we do so, thank you, it's slide number 4. The way by which we do that is to create consensus between all stakeholders represented in our community. And we issued, you can see here the latest version, or consensus statements defining the priorities for brain research at the European level. And actually, we are still busy implementing some of the recommendations of that document. So on the next slide, actually demonstrates why we are doing this. And it's actually one of the ways to describe the impact of the brain and of brain disorders is to try and capture that in terms of socioeconomic cost or socioeconomic impact. So EBC in 2011, so it's now a little bit outdated, it's still striking figures when we come up with more than 1 in 3 Europeans affected by brain disorder, and we even consider this as being underestimated. So that means nearly 180 million citizens in Europe living with a brain condition. And the economic cost on a yearly basis is 800 billion euros, which is quite considerable. So brain disorders are a leading cause of disability worldwide with 12% of DALYs. Second, in terms of death, it's 17% from all causes. And the increase in prevalence is really enormous, as I said. So we estimate this increase in prevalence at 50%. And then globally speaking, the societal cost is just staggering. And not only this, but the impact on individuals is primarily what should be seen as the most important. So how to strategize and prioritize brain disorders, particularly as we face a number of issues that goes with it. So the lack of prevention strategies, shortages of professionals, particularly neurologists, the lack of reliable epidemiological data, that research can be considered as really underfunded or at least not funded in a commensurate manner when we consider the impact of these disorders. And we can even conclude that it is posing a challenge to the sustainability of healthcare systems, not only in low and middle income countries, but largely speaking around the globe for every country. So the playing field of neuroscience is also extremely complex, with still a lack of understanding of most disorders, a kind of risk, I mentioned reluctancy, but it's rather risk adversity from private actors to invest into the space. And we actually realized that this adversity or reluctancy is also now impacting the public sector and public decision makers. The attrition rate in the brain space. So you can see the second column. It's not really clear. I'm sorry for this. But this second column gives you an idea of the attrition rate in Alzheimer's disease. So there is less than 1% overall success rate on the number of drugs that actually make it to a launch from preclinical to a launch phase, which is extraordinarily low, of course. The complexity requires a multidisciplinary approach, hence very complex, and we need to have a vision both long and short term. Okay, so based on this very optimistic statement, what can we do? And that's now entering into what we do at the level of EBC, is to try and actually convince all these nice boxes and these nice columns on the right to get into an agreement in order to prioritize our field. So you add to the inherent complexity of the brain space, this inherent complexity of the EU decision-making process. Because there are many institutions coming into the mix. There are not only EU institutions, but there are also the member states. And on top of the member states, you also have the European Parliament. So you would think that well, we can definitely consider that democratically, you have a high level of representativity of all tiers needing to take part, but just to get everybody to an agreement is equally complex. Now, what we can definitely say is that recently, or somewhat recently, with the emergence of, well, probably one of the major health threats that all generations have known since a couple of decades, we had really to reconsider the way of our priorities are being set, our institutions are functioning. And in that context, we had a quite ambitious speech made by this lady, Ursula von der Leyen, who is the president of the European Commission. And since 2 years now, she repeatedly hammers on the nail of prioritizing health and prioritizing health research, which is quite unprecedented for someone having held this position in the European Union. And even on that basis, calling for European Health Union was a quite ambitious program, which now leads to a situation where DG Santé, so the DG responsible for health within the Commission, is quite equipped in terms of budget and is now in a stage of defining its priorities. So by the way, there is a consultation on that open until the 15th of May. If any one of you feels like filling a few pages of questionnaires on prioritizing our field, it is quite timely and quite important to do that. Now, the question is, how shall we integrate all the proposals that we have in a kind of post-COVID era? Because we know the extent of the priorities. Can we move on to the next one? So we know the priorities and also the impact of COVID that has led to a worsening of the situation. I mentioned some of the challenges with workforce, prevention strategies and all of that, but also concrete recommendations that address those issues, like the emergence of digital solutions or digital solutions becoming mainstreams, for instance, but it's what are the lessons learned? And we are really at a crossroad in terms of our questioning, and there is definitely something to be done about this. Now, just to come about what EBC is doing specifically on the topic of today, on autism, I just would like to come back on this statement about the economic and societal impact of brain disorders. I won't repeat those figures, but this was at the time our starting point to really think about like what can we do about it. And before the what can be done about it, we wanted to maybe shed a new light on those figures by exemplifying the fact that one disease is not another. Can you move to the next one, please? So one disease is not another, is that you can aggregate the figures, but actually, if you compare brain tumors to Parkinson's disease, to migraine or anxiety disorders, you would have a completely different picture. You would have a different picture in terms of the population living with that condition, the actually cost to society of managing the condition of these people, and then obviously making the math is the absolute number of what a particular disease would cost to society. And if we fail to capture this in greater detail, we will fail to offer a proper solution because there is clearly no one size fits all. So on the basis of this state of play, what we did was to initiate a new study that we called the value of treatment. So the value of treatment started from this perspective that very often for the conditions that I just mentioned, the care pathway is completely uneven. Care pathway means that there is a need for access to care, that very often this care exists or this clinical intervention exists, but the patient does not have access for different reasons. So the first step of this new study was to try and capture what we call the treatment gap, so this lack of access to care. Second step was to try and demonstrate the value of putting in place the right clinical interventions. And then thirdly, to formulate policy recommendations in order to come up with optimum patient pathways. So we came up with this notion of the value of treatment, which started from this state of play of the non-treatment and the impact to society, the cost of non-treatment. And the first conclusions that we released on the basis of 9 case studies in 2017 was really focusing on timely intervention, but not only, also on risk reduction, addressing stigma, prevention strategies, and of course, research. And we are now opening the third wave of this study, but I shall actually concentrate on the second round of analysis, where we have a case studies on autism spectrum disorders. And I'm simply going to tease about this because not only I'm not doing the study, but also the study is not over yet. But you can have all the updates on our webpage. And if all goes well, all case studies are releasing their outcome in June, July this year. So the idea here, as I mentioned, the overarching objective, as I said, would be to identify the barriers to care and the causing factors, identify the health gains and the positive socioeconomic impact that we can leverage by the right interventions, and then formulate policy recommendations on the basis of the data generated. So I won't go into the details of the burden of disorders. You're way more informed than me on that, but simply wanted to focus your attention on the, let's say, intermediary deliverables that we released in the context of the Brain Awareness Week on the 3 case studies dealing with mental health disorders. So that means anorexia nervosa, major depressive disorder, and autism, and where we were calling for the need for early detection and continuity of care in each of these spaces. Again, all references on our website. And really to say that this call to action was fully in line with the recent recommendations that the WHO regional office adopted in September 2021. And we actually would like to enter into the agenda of 2030 in that respect. So just a quick word to finish off on the state of play with the research, so that the care pathway for, in our case, children and adolescents, but I understand that this group is rather focusing on adults. Just hoping that this can still be of use in your works. But that the countries that were prioritized in this research were Italy, Spain, and the UK, to try and map the barriers to care and the treatment gap in the way by which actually kids can be looked after, but also in the way carers can access information on how best to accompany children in this process. So there were a few elements that were analyzed. So particularly the delays in screening and diagnosis, the delay in access to intervention, or sometimes no intervention at all, that were available. The amount of information in access and early detection, as well as the lack of support to parents, carers, and children, generally speaking. So you can see here, and all the data will actually be made available. So just to finish off on the model that is under construction at the moment, in order to identify the positives of new interventions and the extent to which we can define those interventions as being cost efficient in the way the care process is being organized. So I'll finish here, and I'm happy to take any question you may have, but also to invite you to be further in touch in view of the final release of conclusions of this case study. And we would also gladly invite anyone involved in the working groups if that is of any interest in your works. So thank you.